Welcome to T3, an industry-leading financial messaging testing platform. With T3, we aim to empower our users to rigorously test their solutions so they can have full confidence in bringing their products to market. We not only provide the infrastructure and framework required for simulating a financial messaging system, but also the tools needed to swiftly identify any issues so that they can be rectified before going into production. At its core, the platform can be broken down into three components. First, networking. This is where users can configure our system to connect to theirs via various connection types such as TCP/IP, HTTP or MQ. Second, users can configure what we call test data. These are representations of financial or security instruments for reuse throughout our third core component, test scenarios. These scenarios are used by our clients to test their own systems, and we have a wide number of modules to modify these testing capabilities. We'll be focusing on test data and test scenarios in this video and covering the wider modules in dedicated separate videos. So let's start by looking at some test scenarios. T3 uses a templating mechanism whereby users configure various template scenarios, common messaging flows, and then based on those templates, they create any number of bespoke versions of those common flows. And those bespoke versions are what we refer to as test scenarios. So here's a template that's trying to simulate an authorization request and response based around an ATM withdrawal. The first message on the left here is what we're wanting to send out of our system. And the second message on the right here is what we're expecting to receive back. To construct or validate messages, we can use a mixture of things. So here I've got a raw value, for example, 0-100. I'm also using keywords, and I can also reference test data. I'll come back to this in a few moments. But a combination of keywords, values, and test data can be used to construct messages, but also validate them as well. And once you've created your templates, you're happy, you've got your common flows configured, you can then create any number of bespoke versions of those bespoke scenarios to test your system. So if we have a look here, this is a bespoke testing scenario based on that template. The values that are coming from the template are in grayscale here. So we can see that 0-100, for example. But I can modify this scenario. I can overrule the 10,000 here that was coming from the template, and I've overridden it for this particular scenario to use 3,000 instead. And I could override any number of these fields to make this scenario more bespoke for whatever it is I'm trying to test. I mentioned we can use test data. So here field 002 is using the pan from a card. What test data those values will be pulled from is configured on the test data tab here. So we can see the message that's getting sent out in field 002 is going to take a pan from a card, and it's going to use this particular card here. If we have a look at it, it's got a pan starting in 5, bunch of zeros and ending in 9. So when this message is constructed and sent out, I'd expect this value to be present in field 002. Looking at test data for a moment, this is a representation of a card. As I said, it's got the field you'd expect: pan, expiry date, PIN, track data, some EMV data. And on the left hand side here you can see we support a wide variety of different representations of real world financial or security instruments. If we look again at the scenario, we can see that the template that we looked at previously, and we also can see that this scenario has been executed a few times before, and we've got some results. So let's have a look at a previous result. That's a failure. On the left hand side, we've got the message that was constructed and sent out of our system, and on the right hand side we've got the message that we received back as a response. We can see the raw value 0-100 that was sent out. We used a keyword for the bitmap, and that the system generated, and you can see that has indeed been generated. And we used card pan to reference test data, and we can see here that pan of 5 zeros and 9 was indeed pulled out of that test data entity and populate it in the message. There are some additional pieces of information accessible here. We can see some of the networking information that this message was sent over, and we can also see the raw hex message that was constructed. On the right hand side, as I said, we've got the message that we received back into the system. This is the one that we're most interested in validating. And you can see we've got an error here, indicated by the red cross at the top of the message, but also the red highlighting on the fields that have the errors. If I hover over the error icon itself, I get a descriptive explanation of why this message has failed validation. We can see that we expected the value 3000, but instead we've got 10,000. If I wanted to, if this was perhaps a more complicated error, again, I could look at the raw message. I could select this field from the message, and it will get highlighted in the raw message. I could select multiple fields to do that. Again, just offering the tools to help identify issues. And then I might go to my external system that I'm testing, reconfigure it in some way, rerun the scenario, and you'd hope to get a pass instead. That's the core of T3. I've got my networking infrastructure set up, so I know what my messages are being sent out over and receiving messages in. I've got test data configured that I can reference and reuse in different scenarios, so that one card could be reused in 1,000 scenarios. And I've got my templates, common messaging flows, and from that, bespoke scenarios to target specific elements of my system that I'm wanting to test. That's the core of T3. Past that point, as I said, we offer various different modules to really enhance and deliver the execution of these scenarios in various different ways. I'll talk briefly about a couple of them. So, for example, we offer something called collections. If I go and look at a collection, it is a collection of those scenarios we were just looking at. I've got 22 of them in this particular collection. But rather than when I run this scenario, rather than it running once using that single card, for example, that I had associated with it, what I can do with collections is I can associate a huge number of different pieces of test data using labels. So maybe I label 100 cards with a particular label and then associate that label with this scenario. You can see I'm doing that here. I'm associating one card tag with this particular scenario. And I can do that with different kinds of test data. I've done it with acquirers and issuers here as well. And so what will happen if I executed this scenario, this collection, is it wouldn't just run this scenario once with that one card. It would execute this scenario any number of times with any number of pieces of test data that I've associated with it. We can see that happens to be 500 in this example. So this scenario would execute 500 times. Collections are a really useful way of executing a small number of scenarios at scale using varying pieces of test data. Additionally, you may be more interested in performance testing. Maybe you've run your scenarios, you know your system can handle individual transactions, but you want to know, can it handle those transactions at scale? So we offer the option to run those transactions at several thousand transactions per second. Modulating, you can see I've got a performance test that modulates from 1,000 transactions per second all the way to 10,000. And that can be done over extended periods of time, whole hours, maybe even days, if that was of interest. Or you may wish to offer T3 as a certification platform. And we offer that capability too through a module we call projects. A project, again, is a collection or a grouping of scenarios. Here I've got some e-commerce scenarios. But they have some trappings around them that lend themselves better to certification. So we've got phases, for example. Various restrictions can be in place based on which phase the project happens to be in. We have a discussion piece here. This is where your clients maybe might raise queries or questions, and an account manager can respond to them in a forum thread style manner. There's lots of different ways of taking those core networking test data scenarios and expanding them out and delivering them for various different use cases. No matter which of these testing pathways makes sense for you, we provide a few different ways for our users to execute their testing goals. So any of these testing methods that I've spoken about, projects, performance testing, or collections, can be ran ad hoc, at a scheduled time, or on a reoccurring basis. In addition, we provide CI/CD integration and headless execution to seamlessly incorporate our T3 platform into your own testing and delivery pipelines. As I said, dedicated videos exploring topics such as certification or performance testing will become available shortly. Thank you for your time, and if you're interested in hearing more about the T3 platform, do reach out to us at iliad-solutions.com and use the contact form available on that website. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.